it's
more profit, right?
yeah, same, maybe up to a point. That was good. That's okay. All right. Yeah. Hopefully it's on there again. I haven't chosen the place. Maybe the Rosendale Rail Trail. You know that big spinning water road? Sure. It's if you are heading towards Lucas from going from Rosendale onto the illustration. This is the video. Sure. That might make it.
Can I ask a question?
So you don't both in doses, right? Yeah. You can have so much trouble. Very stocky. Looks a lot like their dad. What's that?
Talking about the goats.
Oh, no. Was it one of your older goals?
You have bowls? Oh, where?
Do you have the new one, Phil?
Oh, really?
Was it? I mean, I have cows.
Ian, what time is it now?
It's 11:06.
Okay, I've got to leave at 11:30.
Okay.
So if I can,
Okay, yeah.
Fix it.
Nature, the space, and the company and ocean. Just allowing the energy to go through, or is it like cleansing out?
It can depend. It depends on kind of what you feel like you need. You can use more force to pull, like especially if you can feel that not quite tension, but connectedness in the body, not just in the hands. Then the emphasis of the facial amplify that release, or sometimes it's a subtle thing you're trying to move, just the gentlest opening. Any other questions or reflections from practice, if you're able to practice this past week? It would be like sir. So
Sure.
yeah,
That sounded very good.
That's a very interesting sound that we don't have in our language. I always note it.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere online where you can hear these sounds?
Not that I've seen it. I mean, there probably is, but it's pretty hard to. I mean, if you have a source that you trust already, but it's pretty hard to identify whether it's a good source or not.
I couldn't help but notice or try to come up with patterns between each hand symbol, like middle finger this and then switched. So for, I don't know, just noticing, are there any patterns in them? And I'm curious about why you're using certain symbols and using certain fingers. I don't know if there's much information on that, but.
So hand seals can, the thumb under is a way of, the thumb is, so you're flicking the thumb instead of flicking the finger.
Right.
So the thumb is earth.
Right. That's why you're switching in the earth.
And it's also like you're using earth to integrate,
right,
and move Wu and Ji, the yin and yang earth are the movers. So that has a correlation as well. And so that flip of the middle finger holding the thumb is the creating the tension to flick the thumb. And it's also still part of the summer season in a way. So that's the fire.
Right.
Cool. Well, I use the fire finger.
Right. It's relating those two.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
In having one that is distinct.
I like the way the triple burner opens the practice, and I feel like it's there the rest of the practice for me in a different way because I spend that time at the beginning with it.
So you may find that that each of the organs is like that. It's sort of cumulative. Once you kind of activate that, then it stays activated, like move to the next.
Some of them are stronger than others. The green is very strong for me. It shows up the rest of the
fun and experimentation. But also what is kind of accessible to you will vary depending on the individual.
And can you talk of the phases as far as they relate? It's water to wood.
Metal to water. But it can give a little bit of the wrong impression. These things are kind of shape-shifting through the pattern, and the pattern of energy of wood precedes, and out of it arises the pattern that we call fire. But the birthing metaphor can sometimes make the two phases seem a little too distinct. So it's useful in talking about it, but I would keep an eye on that distinction. Forgot my second picture. Second picture.
You know how this would relate to the 4 elements in Western alchemy?
I haven't tried to map it precisely, but there's a lot of overlap. I mean, it's a continuum of energetic difference, and you're choosing to say here or here. I'm talking about this, and I'm using the word air instead of metal or wood to articulate the energy, often from this portion of the sky. I haven't tried to correlate the constellations precisely, but presumably there would be some, quite a bit really of correlation. I'm sure somebody's made a run at it, but
one of the Pragya texts, at least the the planets in one of them when he's giving the
Mhm.
table.
Well, just in basic astrology, each planet has the nature of water, air, fire, earth, just to describe the planet itself and energetically how it operates. So,
Yeah, that'd be the same with these as well. I don't have them. I think I could piece them together. I don't have them memorized, but Mars is fire and
yeah.
Jupiter is wood. You know,
And then the aspects between the planets, where fire and water steam. You know?
sure.
So, and they create different interchanges of energy. Definitely.
Yeah.
It's the name of the Taoist practice that was based on the heavenly bodies. There was a specific practice a long time ago that was relating specifically to planets, I thought. And
That we did.
no, I was just learning about it recently. But
So it could mean any number of different things.
Okay.
Like one of the divisions we make of the cycles is the lunar mansions, the 28 lunar mansions. And so the moon is in a different part of the sky at midnight each night. And those are demarcated by 28 constellations, 7 each of which are associated with a direction and an element. The days of the week have that planetary association also. Yeah, they shouldn't disagree if they're both accurate. So yeah, we should. To me, the easiest kind of baseline is the season pattern, but that we should know that is the cycle's generation, and depending on when and who and where you ask, the initial can be considered not entirely inaccurately. We identify it, January 1st, post solstice, as the beginning of what we call a year. That's water, and in a way, the emergence begins then. But the emergent, we break surface in the spring, and the Chinese calendar initiates its year with the branch animal name. The first week of February 4th or so, as the initial spring impulse. So both make sense. And Chinese calendar systems have sometimes been one and sometimes been the other, and are now both in different contexts.
Mm.
Does your perception of the way that the practice relates energetically to the seasons fluctuate depending on how the energetic state of the outside world is changing and fluctuating? And we were having a conversation, John and I, the other day about solstice and the sort of moment of the beginning of spring, and a sense of that being potentially variable depending on where you are.
Right.
And so I was kind of curious about how that relates to the practice, both in the sense that there's like a formal beginning, but also in terms of the actual fluctuations of seasonality.
Yeah, if you're at the equator or the pole. Right? So we had the good fortune in the Hudson Valley to be at a similar midpoint latitude to those who invented the system, right? So, but yeah, we're kind of in between the equator and the pole, as our brothers and sisters in the south would be also in that. I don't know how the latitude goes, but if it's minus 44 instead of positive 44, I don't know what. But so because we're in the midpoint, what we experience as a fluctuation of seasonal energy, we'll see kind of the full expression of each end of that seasonal energy, whereas the amplitude of that fluctuation is lower the further you get away from the quarter point, obviously toward cold and fully day or fully night at the pole, and toward kind of sameness at the equator. But the energy of the articulation of time, in spite of variations of expression, the solar energy is the same at the same date, right? So some years, as the Huangdi Neijing says, articulating particular energies about a year, the hibernating animals come out early, or the insects are late. And so the patterns change, but the moment with respect that we're observing doesn't change. And I think that how it enters our practice, am I through? I'm great. What I hope to encourage all the way along in developing your daily practices is a kind of structure, but openness to following. And that openness to following is responsive to whether it's the change of time of day, which has seasonal cycling, or the change in season, and your relationship to that energetic phase, or at this particular moment, leaving some space in how you practice and see your practice, and having the courage and confidence to follow an impulse that suggests you should be pushing yourself, holding your breath, or being extra gentle, holding your breath, or, this particular form, flicking with force. Like, you have intuition, with which, if it comes out of stillness and without ego, is wisdom. And if you're give yourself the opportunity to follow that wisdom, then you'll naturally modulate with the seasons. Mm-hmm. The shared goal, yeah. Things accumulate when we do them daily, or have the opportunity to accumulate, and the tradition says that you miss one day of practice and lose 10 days of progress.
I definitively went backwards.
Doesn't take long to get back to zero.
So in our context, sometimes that can be discouraging rather than encouraging. It's meant to be encouraging. But you feel it if you get, 20, 40, 60 days in down the road in practice, you feel this sort of inertia accumulating. It's very rewarding.
I think not just like observing the work, seasonal work, gardening work. If tension is accumulated 1 week and not resolved, and then built up upon, or day by day, but week after week, it feels like a lot of the conflicts or blockages that come out almost intersubjectively are very, very close to tension when you're doing something heavy.
Well, it's useful to because you're both, and probably all of us who aren't speaking also are animated in your relationship to that accumulation. But what you're articulating, it's useful to point out, is a relationship between two energies, right? And that's the relationship. These are the relationships that we're cycling through and healing and daily, or tending as often as we can. And there is a way, that if it's once a week, you're always starting from the beginning, and if it's and that's okay too. That life is life, but the real benefit is certainly in the daily practice.
I always think of it as an onion.
Get broken through unless keep tapping at the window, I have a very clear visceral memory of doing this practice with Master Wu. It's the foundational practice with one of my teachers, and each year, 6 months, that we'd be practicing as a group together again, and you're sort of aware in a different way. It was initially excruciatingly painful, physically, and breath being halted all the way along, and but the regularity of my intervals made it also clear how with this easy to measure effect.
I noted the inertia this week, the inverse of what you were saying, in that sense of kind of hard work at the end of the day when you're entirely exhausted and you resist doing the practice because of the sense that it'll be hard work, and then you sit because John compels you to do the practice. And after doing it, you realize it wasn't hard.
You remove the choice of choosing whether to do it or not. You're just doing it.
Yeah, the choice is the excruciating part.
Yeah, exactly. The internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Can we all just shut up already?
But also the physical exhaustion, I feel like, just doing landscaping, gardening work, that sense of like deep physical tiredness where it's almost you legitimate not doing the practice with a sense of how tired your body is that you couldn't possibly keep your eyes open for it. But that was kind of what was remarkable about it, was that after doing the practice, there was more energy there.
Yeah.
It was not the same state that had preceded it in terms of like the nourishment was very discernible.
Yeah. I get that when I'm waking up. I feel like I need to sleep, and sometimes I'll sit, study, read, or do something like this, and often sometimes I do, but sometimes I feel invigorated from having done that.
Yeah. Is there a traditional time of day that One dose perhaps in the morning.
Either between 3 and 5 or 5 and 7
AM and PM.
a.m.
Yeah.
We can't, I don't know if we're hearing you at the moment, Padma and Stephen, but thank you for sticking with it all. I don't think they can hear me.
Yeah, they seem. Luckily,
They're here.
yeah.
So, can you guys hear me? Chime in anytime. Did I just mess something up? Maybe.
Have you been able to determine if it's on their end or your end?
Something's
Combo of
definitely
both.
on my end.
Mm.
Yeah. Just straight.
You're orienting towards this sort of original
Mhm.
three aspects of originary state in a way. And I can see that pattern of working back from the many towards the one within that. But I suppose, yeah, within what we're looking at here, the fact that the heavenly stems correspond with elements of the body and elements of the seasons. I'm just curious about that. Okay.
So it would all of the stems and branches information is post
Right.
celestial.
Yeah.
But maybe I didn't understand your question because you
I
said
think I was
already
leaving
know
it
that.
vague because I didn't want to divert away from this, and so I was curious how the sort of the emphasis on like maybe the difference between heavenly stems and earthly branches and how they relate to these qualities in a way. Like
Yeah.
what the sort of difference is. I know we'll look at them later as well, but
So it's not entirely known. We have this system, but my understanding is that the heavenly stems are the relationship of the sun to constellations and planets. And the earthly branches are a relationship of the moon cycles with respect to Earth and planets and constellations. And so they both have a.
Can you say that one more time?
So interesting, isn't it?
So the sun in its cycles moves in its relationship to the stars and other planets. And so the heavenly stems, I think, articulate those patterns that are coming into being here. And the earthly branches follow a seasonal month-based pattern, 12 branches, 12 months, 12 lunar phases. And those are articulated by the different location the moon is with respect to the constellations at midnight.
Yeah, one other thing that came up when we were speaking during the week, Abby and I, was that with the basis of a materialist understanding of the universe, you would have to understand the seasons as just being a lack of sun, a lack of a positive, like there's this physical quality and less light, less, the orientation changes, and so you just have less of this positive thing.
equinoxes are perfectly balanced between
Right.
day and night.
But by refining this through the practice, you're almost, that's maybe where my question is coming from. It's a way of sort of orienting that alchemy that can feel so rarefied and abstract, but once it starts to make sense, it's not that you're shifting your worldview, but you're becoming attuned to the fact that there is yin and there is yang, and there is being and there is non-being, and they're commingling.
I think it's a worldview shift. I mean, my experience of going through, like, from being a skeptical, hyper-rational, overeducated human, like the experience of chi, physically and visually, was a
Yeah, and there's a great deal you can learn from naturalism and the way that it describes,
yeah, it's
breaking
not
things down
inaccurate
and-
put in the right
yeah,
perspective. Yeah,
but it's contained within that other view where it's only telling you certain things. It's
Right.
not, and it claims to be describing being or nature,
right.
but from that perspective of probing as though there's only stuff,
Right.
And that's-
Only the touching is
right.
is counted. Yeah.
Apart from being so confounded by quantum weirdness.
Coming from the opposite and finding the opposite hard to digest.
Mm.
How do I articulate that? I feel like I come from a place, the way my mind works from, I'm very still connected to this intuitive connection to energies. And it's always been hard for me, the concrete
accept
world.
the other. Mm.
So it's actually the opposite for me in my approach to this subject,
Right.
weirdly enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're probably outnumbered, I would guess. I like it.
Usually feels like it.
I think I'm in that camp as well. I'm not. I left footed.
But
scoring goals.
But it is interesting, just to kind of connect this conversation with both my experience and the topic. The kind of breakthrough that I was talking about a moment ago with the chi experience and having to integrate that understanding with my model of reality. One of the ways that becomes integrated is backward with experiences that you didn't have a place to put, because your model was a certain way. And, I had sort of matrix-like shimmering, particulate field type experiences that were now continuous with this model of reality in the tradition, whereas before it was just this thing that happened, and so there's a thing that happened, but didn't become part of my understanding, or its wisdom wasn't available to me until through type, seeing things anew from a higher place on the mountain. I lost the meaning in that sense, but
almost that the view and the form of enduring, abiding self are quite closely bound up with one another in some way. Yeah.
Right.
Like you said in the beginning, the scriptures involve displacing that. You're putting aside in a way.
It loosens when if you cannot bow internally or externally, then you're holding tight to something that's between you and the ultimate reality, for sure.
Maybe this is off topic. I just, speaking of these ancient memories, I had this thing relating to heavy fevers as a kid, and also haunted me afterwards. And it was a static of, the only way I can describe this, white and black dots like you'd see a television screen that has no,
Yeah.
and that was intense and felt throughout my body and would take over. That's all I was or saw, and it would come at me and surround me and then feel like it was death or the end or something. And then the only way to get past it was to take the white and the black dot space interaction, and then those would both be accepted, and then it would go away. Yeah, I was just connecting that to yin yang. It's interesting.
Should also read
Chapter of what?
Carlo Rovelli's Reality is Not What It Seems. He's one of a handful of current theoretical physicists that are making sense of quantum this and that.
He's also very interested in like pre-Socratic philosophy, so he's quite an unusual scientist in accepting
Poetic
descriptions
vision of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Strangely similar, not similar, but experiences of hallucination as a child and more of a spatialized sense of like almost like a checkerboard and a sense of a very clear spherical movement towards. And I would wake up yelling when it reached me, kind of thing. Like you said, this impending feeling.
Yeah.
I've gotten that.
It was also feverish.
And also, yeah, so like fever hallucination. But, yeah.
Yeah. Not hallucination. Portal.
It's a preemption of doing this.
I think it is, actually. I'm interested in that sort of checkerboard idea you just had, that, or just expressed, that was that all spatial, or was that temporal as well?
No, I suppose the movement towards is definitely like how Zephyr described, the feeling of like impending or increasing imminence, but associated with a bit like this description of sublimity as like terror and beauty, because it was such a stable vision. It was very almost like a 2D rendering, like when you play chess on the computer, and it had that. I probably had been playing chess on the computer. Think of it, but it had that sense of a rendered, like something not real. Yeah,
mine was definitely both temporal and spatial. So
yeah,
and it was just very, very felt as well as seen.
Yeah,
and those were the same thing. And, so when I describe it visually, of course, that's just how I'm able to tell people, but it's also completely cellular.
So I think these kind of moments, they're useful to talk about and remember, because they're in the same way you can, the way I instruct you to visualize being at the moment of receiving the teaching when you practice, because that moment is alive and accessible and contains the richness of the transmission. That moments like that in our memories can be connected to in that same way, because it is a moment of great openness.
Again, like if you just grasp that through like sickness, you can't see it as that. What we're describing, just that. Oh, you had a stimulus in the body, which raised, like the fever or whatever. But I've never really given it space to be considered like that.
Yeah. Partly asked about the temporal one because I think I've talked about it over tea maybe before, but one of my moments like that was of a time that was spatial. So time, everything had already happened, and I was seeing essentially out across that time. which to me kind of correlates and resonates with. So these things are supportive, I think. Sometimes they're kind of glimpses or windows on future more open states, where sometimes it was a particularly open state that it's useful to reconnect with.
You're saying the teaching, I don't recall you having said that, but when you're hearing the scripture, it's as though you're at this originary point of reception. Is it right to say that the teachings and the realized teachers are there and available given one's act? But I've never really sort of tried to articulate. I mean, maybe I've alluded to it, but it's, I think that I felt like that was right.
Yeah. And in a more sort of coarse, trivial way, it's that non-space, non-time aspect of reality is what makes possible distance healing or something like that. Or even, past or future healing.
What about like distance bad jokes?
Sometimes I think about you other times when you're not around and I laugh.
So I guess
There you go.
It was an interesting experiment that was done where they took medical records of these various patients who had life-threatening diseases and had a group of people pray for some of them and not for others. And the outcome was more positive on the people who prayed for. But the interesting part of the experiment was these were all patients who had been ill in the past. In other words, they were no longer patients. They might have been dead by then. They took old medical records. So in terms of the idea of time and the factor of time.
A little bit of time to look directly at the yin and yang fire element expressions. Just to also just confirm that the pattern of the kind of basic pattern of the cycle of phases, or we say elements, has set in. Somebody want to just say, you could do it without looking at the sheet. I'm going to say that the pattern starting with wood in spring, just first wood, then
Fire.
Then
Metal. And then water.
Yeah. So it makes such clear sense that it's easy to remember. It's worth just, in addition to the practice of the form, which ingrains it and integrates it deeply, playing with it in your mind too, noticing the springtime of the day, how it leads to the heat of the day and the diminishing or the rising, as John was pointing out, of the evening. And just kind of tethering to that cycle for a day or a week or a month or a lifetime will help strengthen and enrich the associations and correlations that you bring to your visualizations when you're doing the practice, not to mention the rest of life. So I want to remind you that I've on the chart, the heart and small intestine are in the wrong place on the.
Right. I meant to switch that.
Yeah. So small intestine is yang. It's the organ that moves, and heart is the yin organ. So jia yi bing ding wu ji nung xin run gui is the same as saying wood, fire, earth, metal, water. So the fourth column there, if you're looking at the more informational side, you see jia and yi, wood elements, that yang and yin wood elements that we talked about last time. And now fire, south, red phoenix, articulated in the yang and yin manifestation as bing and ding, bing being yang fire, ding being yin fire. Seasonally, early and late.
Other way around, right? Or no, that is
no,
correct. So those were
that's
switched as well.
The only thing to switch is
Ding is
the organs.
Oh, okay, right. Oh, right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
All the other information is
So Bing,
correlated.
Yang.
Ding is yang. Yep.
Okay. Ding is Yang.
Um,